Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bouncing Back. I am your host, Joanna, and today we are going to be chatting about navigating change with strength-based strategies. So change is something we all go through in life, and it can be the biggest sign of growth, but it can also be one of the hardest things we do. So to help today, we are joined by Jana Dawson. Jana is a Wellbeing Consultant, head of the Positive Psychology Department at the School of Positive Psychology, and she is passionate about facilitating well-being through better awareness, relationships, and engagement. Hi, Jana. How are you today?
Hi, Jana. I'm good. Thank you. Glad it's Friday.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for joining us. I feel like this is a perfect way to spend a Friday talking about change. So before we get started, please tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
So I'm originally from Croatia, but I have spent more than 25 years in Asia, and previously I was in Middle East. And I think what I'm really, through all the travel and moving countries, one thing that I always really valued was my relationships with people and understanding people better. And the best times were when we had that real high quality connection, when we were helping each other become our better selves in a way. So I've always been interested in intercultural communication, and also social behavior and psychology. So my path sort of led me to the School of Positive Psychology, originally as a student and now as part of faculty and the academic board. And really, I'm passionate about just trying to find ways that we can elevate well-being for individuals, for groups, for communities in the society in a way that's culturally sensitive, in a way that makes sense for that context.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's so amazing. You made your way from a student now to the head of the Department of Positive Psychology. So that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'd love to get to know you a bit more with some get to know you questions in a section we call Have You Met Jana? So my first one for you is, what is your favorite book?
I just want to say, I obviously send these questions beforehand, and I was really struggling because I love books, and I kind of went with intuition. Was my favorite book. And, I'm one of those people that enjoys a buffet of different topics. But I have to say, like, The Joy Luck Club was one of the books that just popped into my head. And I just remember being fascinated by the culture, by the relationships of the women in the book, by resilience, the coping strategies that they had. And I do remember reading that book and just becoming more excited to learn more. So I know it's a fictional book, but at the same time, it was just something that really tapped into my curiosity.
Yeah, brilliant. I feel like I'm the same. I have so many different interests and different topics, and I love a wide variety of things to look at. So I can totally relate on that. My next question is there a movie that you've recently enjoyed?
I'm not big on movies, to be honest. I don't really watch a lot of movies. However, I did watch a really cool documentary recently. It's called The Last Artisan. And
Okay.
it's connected to a special place in Singapore. It's called Haupar Villa. It's kind of like used to be around. It was designed by the Tiger Balm family. I don't know if you know the oil Tiger Balm, and it's a place where it looks at Buddhism and looks at actually different levels of hell. And it has a lot of sort of mystery around it. And there's one man that lived there since he was a child who paints the figurines. And this movie is about the last artisan who lives in this Haupar villa and was painting all these figurines. And the movie's about him. And it's just such a gentle movie about someone who really finds flow and engagement in the work that he does, in the simplicity of it. So I really enjoyed it.
That sounds really interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Thank
very
you for
cool.
sharing that. Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'll have to give that one a go. Awesome. Perfect. Well, we've got a couple more questions here. And my next one is, do you have a favorite podcast that you've been listening to?
The Hidden Brain.
Okay. What's that one about?
Vedanta. It just brings in different topics on behaviors and cognitions and emotions of people. And it's different guests coming to the podcast. Shankar Vedanta is the name of the host. And he is fabulous. And I just love the way that they curate the podcasts. It's, they bring in different parts around this topic. So, for example, the latest one that I listened to was about cravings and how, as human beings, how we can manage our cravings, whether that's for food or wine or whatever it is, right? So it was really interesting. And he always has very interesting guests on the podcasts, and I enjoy it. And it's they're usually about 45 minutes long, which is perfect for me to go to work, and then I finish it driving home from work.
Oh, I love that. There's nothing more satisfying than getting through a podcast. I love finishing one and being like, oh, yes, I finished a podcast. I haven't just left it halfway through because it's too long.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a great podcast with lots of different topics.
Great. Well, I jotted that one down. So hopefully I'll get a chance to look at that because I love podcast recommendations. I'm always looking for something new to listen to. So thank you so much for that. Last one here is, do you have a role model or anyone in your life that you look up to?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Again, tricky one. There's lots of people that inspire me. In fact, one of the professors was here from the US over the past weekend, and it was he inspires me. Okay, I'm going to be really cliche with this, but it is going to be my mother because she is 76 years old. She still works and has she has just been headhunted for a job at the age of 76. And I personally think that's really amazing to stay current and to stay engaged and passionate about the work that you do. And that at the age of 76, you still feel motivated to get up in the morning and do your work and do it to the best of your ability and be appreciated for it by other people, clearly, because, she's being headhunted and she's, moving on into a new position, which is amazing.
Oh, that's great. What does she do for work?
She's a doctor. She's a breast cancer specialist. So she's very much, I think, driven by compassion and care.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely and so inspirational to hear that, she's still working and she was still wanting to get out there. That's so amazing because there's this stigma and the stereotype of when you reach a certain age, you just stop working or you should stop putting in effort into what you're passionate about because you're supposed to retire, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. And just because you get to a certain age doesn't make you obsolete or not part of contributing to the community.
Exactly. Definitely. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's
yeah,
awesome.
No problem.
Great. Well, let's dive right in for today. So I'd love to start with a little bit of definition. So let's begin by defining change. What is change and how does it arise in our lives?
So, yeah, I mean, look, we all have to deal with change in our lives. And change is really kind of a shift or a disruption in what you consider to be your norm, right? Yeah. What is happening to you every day? Change can be internally driven. So, for example, I'm choosing to make certain changes in my life, develop new habits. It doesn't make it easy. It still makes it very hard. But I tend to be more motivated. You kind of see it coming. So it can be what we can consider, let's say, a positive change because you want to do something for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's a change in either your cognition or the way that you manage emotions, your behavior, right? So that would be then that internally driven change. A lot of the times we're dealing with external change, right? And that is when it's out of our control. Change can be restructuring in an organization. Change can be being made redundant, a change in your relationships. A change can happen across your life domains at any point. And when we don't have control over that change, and we don't expect it, for example, or we just don't have autonomy around it, and it can be quite disruptive for our well-being, right? It can create a lot of anxiety, negative emotions. However, change, as in just a simple word change, it just means that there is a shift of some sort going on that is outside of what you expect and outside of the norm. Yeah.
And I think that's what's really scary about change, especially when it happens outside of your control. You don't want something to change, but it changes and you can't help that it's happening. And all you can do is accept that it's happening and work with it. And that can just be really scary when you just have to, roll with what's happening around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as human beings, we like routines. We like knowing what's going to happen, experiencing a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity about our conditions. It just doesn't make us feel safe, right? Safety in a way is predictability. Safety in a way is knowing how you're going to react when I say something, how my environment around me, what control I have over my environment as well. So when that doesn't happen in our lives, it can be really scary. And it can create these negative emotions in us that we don't necessarily know what to do with at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been looking into how people view change, and there's a lot of people that have this mentality of why me? Why does it have to happen to me? Why do I have to change? But then there are some people who think that it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. And change is necessary in order to grow. And when you're changing and when life is changing and things are changing around you, it means you're entering or you're about to enter a new chapter of your life, or something great is about to happen. So what's your perspective around all of these?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really depends on the mindset you have towards change and attitude you have towards change. One of the things that I really like is you can't wait to not be uncomfortable to take action. It's almost like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Change can be uncomfortable. So if we sit back and wait until that discomfort leaves, it stops us from actually moving forward and growing. So how do we get comfortable with these negative emotions of, maybe a bit of anxiety? And anxiety can be quite motivating in itself as well. So it's almost like we have to remove that idea that negative emotions are bad for us. Sometimes negative emotions can be very motivating. And, so we have kind of, if you go with Carol Dweck's research, for example, around mindset and growth mindset versus fixed mindset. People with a growth mindset are more likely to accept change as part of, let's say, hey, this is happening for me, right? This is an opportunity for me to grow, because people with a growth mindset believe that they can change and they can learn and they can expand beyond who they are today, right? And that can put a certain amount of excitement in this idea of change, right? However, if we come with a fixed mindset of I am who I am, I will not change, what you see is what you get kind of concept, then it's very hard to see how change can benefit you. And you just can't get past that, right? And that's where there's a lot of resistance about change. And, again, also depends on whether you have a deficit mindset or an abundance mindset, right? So are you seeing change as something that's taking away from you, Or are you able to see, well, what opportunities can grow out of change?
Yeah.
And those are two different ways of thinking around it.
Yeah, and I think abundance has become this sort of buzzword recently. Everyone is talking about, an abundance mindset and like living in abundance and practicing gratitude, even during those hard times, because that's how you practice the law of attraction, or you practice, bringing good things towards you. So how can we use sort of abundance as a way to navigate change?
Yeah, great question. So, as you said, this abundance mindset concept is gaining in popularity. Why? Because it really forces you to see what is working in your life rather than what's missing in your life. And that's where that whole practice of gratitude comes in. It's really about shifting your mindset to look at, hey, what do I already have in my life, right?
Yeah.
And as you probably know yourself, our negativity bias doesn't help us in the sense that we're always looking at what is lacking rather than what we have, right? Having that innate focus on weaknesses that have helped us through evolution to keep us safe.
Yeah.
But that said, it doesn't help when it comes in the acceptance of change, right? So the abundance mindset is like, okay, what do I already have in my life that I'm grateful for? And what can I possibly gain going forward to add to this kind of abundance? And how does that help with change? I mean, gratitude is an emotion, right? And it is a positive emotion. So if you connect it to some of the research by Barbara Fredrickson, for example, and her broaden and build theory, when we are experiencing positive emotions, it actually widens our cognitive scope, right? So we are able to see more opportunities. We are able to solve problems better, right? We're able to shift ourselves beyond that. So obviously in the times of change, if you're thinking like, oh gosh, this is bad, this is taking away what I have, as opposed to, being able to put yourself in an abundance mindset, which then cultivates positive emotions, which then says, oh, I wonder what opportunities I can have here instead. I wonder what I will learn. I'm curious to know how I can grow through this process. That's a different way of self-talk than, oh no, they're disrupting my life. So it's very important, that mindset around change.
Definitely. And I think it's so important, but it's hard to do when, change is happening and it's impacting you and it's making you feel like your life is crumbling around you. So what impact can change have on our mind and our resilience and, our bodies?
Yeah. So, I mean, change has been compared to the stages of grief as well. And we just have to remember that there's a myth around, oh, I'm okay with change. No, it's a muddling process, right? You might have denial, you might have resistance, you might have anger around it, and then shifting into acceptance, and then what you do with it, right? So, even people with a growth mindset will still go through that kind of process. It's not as simple as we make it out to be, right? It's not like you just go to bed and wake up the next morning and it's perfectly fine, right?
Yeah.
So, what change can it have on us in terms of our resilience? First of all, like I mentioned before, in the context of emotions, right? If you're getting a lot of anxiety from this, if you're getting a lot of negative emotions, it can affect our well-being, right? It increases our stress levels. It's not. We don't like being stuck in that cycle. It's not supporting us, right? So if you're on that negative cycle that's sort of like just pulling you down, it's not a space where we tend to thrive and flourish, right? I mean, it affects us in the context of you're using a lot of energy, right? To go through that process of change. It takes up a lot of our energy, and energy is really a resource that helps us stay resilient. When you're out of energy, when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're stressed, it's very hard to then see the world through an abundant mindset. So change can affect really what we call if you think of resilience as something like we are all innately resilient, right? I believe that every person is resilient, because if they weren't, they wouldn't get out of bed first time they had an adversity of some sort. That said, resilience is like a reservoir, and it can get depleted. So if we are going through change, that takes up a lot of our energy, and this resilience in a reservoir is just being depleted, and we don't have strategies, coping strategies to sort of replenish the reservoir as we go along, eventually it's just going to be completely dry and empty. And then it's very difficult to bounce back from that challenge, right? So, it, like I said, it can be very depleting change, and it can affect us, our self-talk, negative emotions, and our health in general.
Yeah, and how does strengths-based approaches to change come into play here, and what are they?
Oh, yeah, great. So, positive psychology, the foundation of positive psychology is really character strengths. Why? Because psychology very much focused previously on weaknesses and fixing people's weaknesses, right? Which is fine. And as Martin Seligman said, he felt that psychology was half-baked. We were very good at making miserable people less miserable, but is that good enough, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it on a scale of, let's say, -10 to +10, and we're very good at taking people to that 0, maybe even 2 or 3, but how do we take people to being at their best, going to that +10, right? And I guess that's where the character strengths came in, because we are not just weaknesses, we're also strengths. Yeah. And there was that lack of balance in psychology around that. So positive psychology is looking at human optimal functioning. And we believe that you cannot be at your optimal functioning unless you identify your strengths. And what are strengths? Strengths are basically your psychological capacity, innate capacities, right? That you sort of are, that you can develop and move. It's not like you're stuck with this 5 strengths that you have now. Of course, you can develop more strengths, but it's something that comes natural to you. It energizes you. It makes you feel good. You love doing it, and there's a difference between skills and strengths. You could be very good at doing something because you learned how to do it. Like, for example, I don't know, you could be very good at Excel spreadsheets, or you could be even very good at debating because you've practiced and you've done it a lot of times, but it doesn't energize you. You don't wake up in the morning and go, I can't wait to go and do my Excel spreadsheets, right? However, maybe you have a strength of creativity, or maybe you have a strength of teamwork. So that excites you. Oh, yes, I can't wait to meet my new team, or I can't wait to connect with my team, because it energizes you, and you love to do it, and it comes natural to you, and you're good at it, and you can still develop skills around it. For example, you can develop your skill in communication, but ultimately that's just kind of, you are that person, your teamwork person kind of thing, right? So identifying your strengths is important in general in life, but it is particularly attached to dealing with challenges, dealing with change, and primarily because when we are using our strengths in those moments, we're more confident. Okay, we're more aligned with our own values too. So in those challenging moments, it helps almost like a compass. It guides a direction for us of actions that we can take. Like, we're more resourceful. So, for example, if I have a strength of social intelligence, and I'm aware of this strength, I can reach out to people and use that social intelligence to help me go through this challenging time. Let's say that your organization is going through change. You can use your social intelligence to maybe navigate your new role and ask people how to do that. So seeing yourself through this lens of strength, it makes it much easier to manage challenges by activating and using your strengths to help you overcome.
Yeah. And how does using a strengths-based mindset help you build your personal resilience and your ability to bounce back in these challenging times, for example, during change?
Yeah, so I guess strengths-based is very much connected to abundance mindset that
Yeah.
we talked about before, right? So first of all, you see yourself as resourceful,
Yeah.
right? You see yourself as someone who's not flawed or full of weaknesses. So the moment I start to perceive myself as being competent and capable and resourceful, that in itself then can help to guide my actions in times of change, right? So, like we talked about change being a space for opportunities. If let's say I'm faced with changes in my organization
Yeah.
and restructuring, I can say, oh, what strengths can help to guide me along? The moment I'm thinking of myself as using strengths in that moment, that in itself becomes hopeful. And it becomes more optimistic than looking at myself and saying, oh, how am I going to manage my weaknesses to help me get through this change as well, right? So using those strengths and then aligning those strengths maybe to the task that you're doing, right? And knowing, for example, what are my skills and what drains my energy? And of course, look, it's unrealistic to think that all the time you will be using your strengths. Sometimes we have to do work that
Yeah.
is aligned more with our skills, and it doesn't necessarily energize us, like admin, for example.
Yeah.
We talked about you doing admin. However, if you know that connecting with people and working on a team does energize you because it's aligned with your strengths, then you can plan your day in a way that you get some opportunity to use your strengths because that will then energize you. And being energized with positive emotions, connection with others will actually maintain your resilience levels so that your well-being won't be as affected as much while you're going through a challenging time of change or any other adversity, right? So it's more about identifying your strengths, knowing your strengths, then being able to apply your strengths in everyday life to boost your own competence and confidence, to cultivate more positive emotions, to be able to actually perceive your day to be more meaningful. Because when you're working with your strengths, people who use their strengths tend to perceive their lives to be more meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And that in itself are all of the multiple factors involved in maintaining and boosting your resilience levels.
Yeah, definitely. And how can we go about recognizing and identifying what our strengths are, especially during times of difficulty and challenge, because it's so much easier to see all the negatives and be like, I'm bad at this. This is why things are changing. This is why things are happening to me. So how can we recognize our strengths so we can leverage them for better?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, there's different ways to identify. The most straightforward way is to, for example, you can go and do values in action, character strength survey. It's free online and it gives you a guideline. It will identify your top strengths and you can then kind of have a conversation with yourself and say, is this me? Do I agree with this?
Yeah.
Does this sound right? I'm not saying that VIA is perfect. Your strengths probably better, but it's a starting point to identify those strengths, right? One of my favorite things to do with people is storytelling. Just simply thinking to yourself, like, when was I at my best? What happened? Why do I see that time to be me at my best? And that's not, this is a positive psychology intervention in a way. It's not saying that your talents, it's nothing to do with your talents. It's more to do, it could be something simple like, I was at my best when I was managing my kids in the morning and trying to get them ready for school and getting myself ready for work at the same time. And I was at my best because I stayed playful, because I was kind to myself and allowed myself to have a cup of coffee without rushing to the car, you know. I was really proud of myself because I had this moment of self-regulation where I didn't yell at my kids, right? So even in those simple daily moments, we can be at our best. So just taking yourself back and thinking, when was the last time I was at my best? What was I doing? What was I thinking, right? What are some of the emotions that came up to me? You will probably be able to identify strengths in those events.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, it's really a fun activity to do. And sometimes people really struggle. And that's, again, abundance mindset cultivation, because people struggle to think of themselves when were you at your best. If I turned around to you and I said, hey, Joanna, tell me last time you didn't do well, you'd probably have a whole bunch of stories to tell me. I would too, right? But when we ask people like, hey, when was the last time you were at your best? There's always a pause. They really have to think. And that's not because they were not at their best, because most of the time that you're at your best more than you're at your worst. It's just that we're not used to seeing ourselves through that lens. So just, retraining your mind in a way will help you get there, right? Asking other people. Sometimes we're blind to our own strengths, right? There's such thing as strengths blindness. And, going up to people that you're comfortable with and saying, what strengths do you think I have? What do you see in me? And you'd be surprised how people can be, oh yeah, you're really creative. Or, oh gosh, you're really amazing in the way that you persevere whenever you do a task, right? So those are all strengths. So other people are a really good mirror in that way. Sometimes they will point out your skills rather than your strengths. So we have to be mindful of that. And recognizing energy. And energy, I find, is something that's a really important thing to become aware of as human beings. Like last year, we had a lot of conversations about people burning out because there was a lot of change. And it's funny, like the pandemic was over, and yet, we were expected to go back into the same groove as we had before. Nothing really changed that much, there was a lot of changes in global crisis and everything else. So I found that at the end of last year, people were really tired. Everybody I spoke to is like, how are you? I'm really tired. And that's, to me, is just not managing energy, right? And strengths do energize us. So asking yourself, what energizes you in life? Oh, I feel really energized if I spend some time drawing. Great. Because I tap into my strength of creativity, I get to focus and give my full attention, right? Or I feel really energized when I have a quick conversation with one of my colleagues and have that real connection, right? So, recognizing, because that's usually when you're using your strengths. So if you monitor your energy throughout the day, you'll probably notice when you're using your strengths and when you're more reliant on your skills, for example. So these are just some of the tricks to use to identify and, asking yourself, what feels like true me? What do I love to do? What do I look forward to doing? What gets done first on my to-do list because I can't wait to get it done, right? And those are usually your strengths.
And I love the one you mentioned about looking back on your best moments and when you were at your best and being like, what was I doing then? How was I feeling then? Because that's so important. And that's something that I've actually been trying to do recently. When I'm in like a low moment, I'm like, okay, let's go back to when I was in that good moment. What was I doing? What was I saying? What was I feeling? How can I get back to that? And what I've noticed is that it's actually quite difficult because you're like, oh, I was feeling so great in this moment. What exactly was I doing? And why was I feeling that way? And how do I get back to that? And sometimes I feel like we can beat ourselves up for not consistently being that way all the time and not knowing how to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things with like the whole positive psychology, the science of positive psychology is based on identifying those moments in people. So for example, Martin Seligman, who wrote the book Learned Optimism, what did he do? He looked at people who are really optimistic and he asked questions like, what is that person doing that I'm not doing? Right. And then how can we replicate that? And the replication part is really important because that then becomes an intervention. So like you were saying, if you identify those moments of your kind of optimal functioning and say, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Then when you're dealing with a more challenging time, let's say you're going through change and you're struggling through that change, you can say, you know what? Last time when I was at my best, I really made sure that I spend 10 minutes in nature every day. Yeah. And I remember identifying that as something that really helped me. And if that's the case, then, hey, why not replicate that now when I'm going through a really difficult time? And then notice, does that help? Is that helpful right now?
Yeah. And I wanted to know if there are any pitfalls to overusing our strengths, or can we use them in a wrong way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, everything has to come in balance, right? Well, let me ask you a question. So what do you think might be a pitfall of overusing your strength of kindness?
You let other people take advantage of you if you think that you're supposed to continuously give to other people, make other people feel good, and use your kindness as their strength as opposed to your strength, I guess.
Yeah, totally. You're absolutely right. I mean, let's say that I'm so kind that I can't say no to you. And so I'm not accomplishing my goals because every time I sit down to do something that's going to bring me closer to my own destination and goals, and you ask me for something, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it because I'm coming from that space of kindness, right? And that's overusing the strength and using it in the same way. And then it's saying like, well, could I use that strength for self-kindness, kindness to self versus kindness to others? And what would that look like instead? Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Or like, for example, perseverance.
Yeah.
What would happen if you overuse perseverance?
Oh, you would think that you had to get through everything and you had to be this emotionless person who doesn't get impacted by anything, and then you might crash and burn at one point.
Totally, right? So overusing your strength of perseverance is a great strength for accomplishing, for getting stuff done. But if you overuse it, you will go into that burnout space, right? And you might even not have the ability to step outside of what you're doing and see like, are these actions still relevant to the context? I'm just persevering. I'm not using my strength of perspective in this moment where I'm looking and saying, are these actions actually taking me to where I want to be? What damage is it doing to my other domains in my life? So you can certainly overuse your strengths. A lot of times people will rely on the same strength over and over and over again. So, let's say using your strengths in clusters in a way helps to not overuse one strength over and over again. Let's say that you rely on humor as a way to connect with people. Because you have a strength of humor. It's not always an appropriate thing to do, right? It sometimes can become too much. If you're constantly using humor on me, I'm like, well, maybe you're not taking me seriously.
Yeah.
So maybe when you're making those connections, instead of just using your strengths of humor, maybe you want to use empathy as well. Yeah. Maybe you want to use communication and social intelligence, right? Maybe you want to use rapport builder. There's many different strengths that you use while you're connecting with somebody, and knowing when to use those strengths in different situations can help us avoid overusing the same strength. Right. Yeah. So even in challenging times, you might say like, okay, I need to get over this. I'm really good at self-regulation. So I'm going to, let's say you've been made redundant and you're going through this change and it's really difficult. And you're like, okay, self-regulation is my strength. So I'm going to not go out because I don't want to spend money. I'm going to, really be disciplined and da. Great, but you might be missing out on some of the opportunities as well. So you might say, well, actually, I'll use self-regulation, but I will also use social intelligence and go out because that might open up opportunities to find a new job.
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it definitely does. I feel like one key thing I got from that, especially from your kindness example, is not just kindness to other people, but also to yourself. What you're applying is being applied to other people and externally, learn how to apply it within yourself. So if one of your strengths is being generous and you're constantly being generous towards other people, try being generous towards yourself and balance things out. And I feel like that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, learning how to be agile with the way that you use your strengths and always asking yourself, are my actions helping or harming me
Yeah.
in this moment? Right?
Yeah.
Are they helping me to accept this change? Are they helping me to take actions within this change where I see my growth, where I'm actually supporting my well being? Or are the actions that I'm taking harming either my well being or my ability to move towards the goals that I have achieved or my relationships?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to transition into our practices and habits and continue what we've been talking about, but in the context of a practice that people can use to harness their strengths in moments of uncertainty, moments where they're feeling unsure of themselves because everything is changing around them. Is there something you could walk us through to help us harness our strengths in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, unfortunately, there's not like a formula that you can just plug because
Oh,
human
yeah.
beings are complicated, right?
Yeah.
And, and what works for one person might not work for the other person.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, just having the vocabulary around strengths and developing a strengths language is really important. Years and years ago, when I was studying meditation and mindfulness, I remember my teacher said to me, you can't fix a ship in the middle of the storm. You have to make sure you're doing it on a sunny day. So, first of all, don't wait until you're in a really challenging situation to suddenly go, oh, yeah, let me figure out how I'm going to use my strengths. Okay. So, take the time to really get to know yourself and know your strengths and look at them, how you're using them when it's a sunny day, not necessarily a challenging thing, because it's a habit that you have to form.
Yeah.
So when change is happening and then you're like, okay, now I'm dealing with adversity of some sort, right? I'm dealing with uncertainty. How can I use my strengths? And I think it really helps on several levels. First of all, are my actions aligned with my strengths? Because if your actions that you're taking are aligned with your strengths, the chances of you staying motivated and the chances of you reaching those goals is higher.
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, you decide on the actions, looking at your strengths and say, okay, what do I need to do in this moment? Let's say that I have to go and knock on doors and try and find another job, for example, right? What strengths can support me here, right? Maybe courage, maybe honesty, maybe social intelligence because you know somebody who works in that company and you want to call them in advance and let them know, right? So looking at what do I need to do and looking at what strengths do you have to support you in this situation and really writing it down. How will I use my strength in this moment? Okay. I think often we are more reactive and impulsive in the way that we take actions, particularly when we are dealing with uncertainty or challenges. You just kind of feel like you need to take action, right?
Yeah.
But I think creating a plan is really important because then you're taking informed actions. You're taking actions that you're more confident in taking. You don't get so flustered in that moment because you've planned it.
Yeah.
And that in itself gives you confidence, right? So really thinking about what strengths do I have that can support me in this situation and how will I use that strength with practical actions, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's not an action thing, it could be a mindset, so going back to the mindset, what's your self-talk? Okay. So for example, self-regulation is not my strength, right? So if I'm saying to myself, okay, Jana, you really have to be regulated on this. You really have to make sure that you're doing this every single day for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours of looking at new work. That in itself makes me feel, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not confident. I'm not confident in being able to achieve that.
Yeah.
However, I know that my strength is teamwork, and I work better when I'm surrounded by other people.
Yeah.
So if I say to myself, I tell you, I'm not going to sit at home and try and find new jobs. How about I ask other people who are in the same situation if we can do it together? That makes me feel more hopeful in itself, right? It helps me be more encouraged in my own actions. So it's a real process of discovery as an individual. Like I said, identifying your strengths, number one, is really important. Knowing how you use your strengths on a sunny day is really important. And then when those change happens and that uncertainty happens, identify what actions you need to take and look at which strengths can support you and shift either your self-talk or shift in the way that you do the actions, right? That comes more from you, that space of confidence and strengths. I'm not sure if that is clear enough.
No, that definitely makes so much sense. And when we do all of this, how can we see this benefiting our resilience and perception in life?
Well, you're certainly cultivating an abundance mindset, okay, to begin with. It helps your resilience because you feel more resourceful. When we are dealing with a challenging time, we often feel out of control. And that's not a comfortable feeling for most people.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're using our strengths, the resilience is built by the fact that we're cultivating these positive emotions. Resilience is built by the fact that we're taking actions and seeing success with those actions. So breaking down things into smaller steps is also really helpful, right? And using your strengths on each one of those smaller steps, right? So resilience is about bouncing back. It's about steering through, right? It's a messy process. But the more energized you feel, the more confident you feel in your own actions, the more likely you are to be able to get up in the morning and have a plan and be motivated to take that plan, right? And that's really what resilience is about, I feel, right? And, strengths in that sense do really help us in guiding us and replenishing that resilience reservoir. It's your resource.
Yeah, I love that resilience reservoir, and it's something that can continuously be replenished. And I really like that. That's a really great way to put it.
Yeah. So what replenishes you?
Oh, that is a very good question. I feel like I probably couldn't even answer that because it's just everyone's just so busy these days. I am so busy, and you never really take that time to think about your strengths, what fuels you, what replenishes you, and you're constantly just using what's left in that reservoir until it's depleted, and then you're like, "Oh, now I have to take action." Like we talked about before, don't wait until you're in that challenging time. Don't wait until you're in the storm to deal with it. But yeah, I wish I could really answer that question, but I think this has highlighted to me that I need to work on replenishing my reservoir.
I know, it's really interesting how we don't think about these things. And I was listening to an interview with Michelle Obama. This was quite a while back. And she said, we plan for everything in life and we don't plan for joy.
Yeah.
Okay. And she said, why not plan for joy? And I really like that. And when I heard that, and it's quite a few years back, I really make a conscious effort to what are your daily slices of joy? And the chances are that your daily slices of joy are very much aligned with your strengths as well, right? So really simply asking yourself a question of what brings me joy? And even in the most challenging times and when we're dealing with change and everything seems a little bit overwhelming, asking yourself, what will I do today that just brings me joy? Because it's more about just joy. It's about actually replenishing resilience and replenishing yourself in that moment, and it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be long. Time is a precious resource. It can be simple things like connecting with a friend, like taking 5 minutes to savor your cup of coffee as opposed to doing multitasking in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Just going outside and enjoying a moment of connecting with nature, watching your favorite YouTube video for 5 minutes, listening to your favorite song.
Yeah.
All of those are just simple things that really help us to stay resilient.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting, this concept of joy. We often think of it as something that's rare or something that we have to have occasionally. It's not something that we can continuously feel. And it's like a treat. Like, oh, we're happy or we feel joy. That's a treat. It might not come around again, or let's savor it. But I feel like with an abundance mindset, you can think of joy as something that you continuously could have, as opposed to it just being a treat or something that you rarely have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you make a very good point, something we rarely have. But a lot of times it's about giving yourself permission to take time to think about joy. Why would I be thinking about joy? Look at my massive to-do list. I've got so many other things that I should be doing instead. This just seems like hedonic moment of indulgence. Why would I do that? But if we understand that actually cultivating that joy is beyond feeling good in that moment, it's actually really good for our well-being in the context of resilience and in the context of overcoming challenging situations. Unless you're putting that in, you will deplete yourself, right? So it's not about being selfish. It's not about taking time out of a precious day to do something frivolous. It really is taking care of your well-being. And that in itself is a mindset shift that we need to have.
Definitely. I 100% agree. And I'm so glad we've brought up topics of joy and abundance, things that we don't really think about and things that rarely come up in conversation because, like you said, joy, like why would we need to think about that when we can think about our to-do list? So it's very important to talk about. And that brings me to our last little section for today, which is our open mic. So I'd love to hand it over to you. It's a space for you to talk about whatever you would like to. So, yeah.
Oh, this is a good one. I want to talk about the importance of communities. It's something that's really close to my heart. I come from a collectivist culture, right? And I feel that people perceive themselves to be living almost in a vacuum. We get busy with our own lives. We get trapped in what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And we tend to not look at ourselves as part of a bigger system.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's really important that we shift that mindset and recognize interdependence. I can't do my job unless you're there, right? I can't. So really stepping back and recognizing, what did it take for me to enjoy this cup of coffee? How many people were involved?
Yeah.
Who was involved? Where does it come from? Because it helps us to feel as part of the system, and it can be really lonely otherwise when we don't have that. And I think it's a two-way street. I think as an individual, I have to contribute through my actions to that system, but I also need to know that that system is there to support me.
Yeah.
In the context of resilience, it's really hard to stay resilient and continue replenishing if you don't have a system that supports that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I urge all of us to think about, like, how am I embedded in this system? How is this system supporting me? What can I do to support the system? Because maybe one day my resilience is going to be low, but your resilience is going to be higher. And just being with you in that moment helps to boost my own resilience.
Yeah.
And I just find that often we don't take the time to recognize that interdependence. and recognize that we're part of a system. And I do believe that going forth, creating more systemic thinking and approaches ultimately will help to boost everyone's well-being.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's so important because when we're doing really well, it can be easy to be in that vacuum and think of ourselves as being on our own. Like, yes, I'm doing great. I'm happy. I'm fine. But then when we have those low moments, that's when we look beyond ourselves. And that's when we're like, okay, who's around me? Who's my community? I need someone to lean on. And if you haven't focused on nurturing that or paying attention to the processes around that, then it can feel really isolating and it can make those challenging times feel even more challenging because you're going through it alone.
Yeah. And people do tend to go more insular when we're dealing with challenging times. When you're happy, you're like, hey, da 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 da. But I just feel that please reach out to people around you.
Yeah.
Because you're giving them an opportunity to help, and then we're creating a stronger system for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I love that because it's so important to see yourself, in harmony with other people and not just with yourself. Like, for me personally, I know that I feel great when I know that I've got people around me who love and support me and I can go to them and they can come to me, and it's this, give and take relationship as opposed to just, thinking of myself in isolation to the world and I'm against the world sort of mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if anything, any fun activity, if you ever want to do, is put yourself in the center and make connections on a piece of paper and just recognize who in the world is involved in you being where you are right now and how are they supporting you. It's a way that we can actually recognize that interdependence, extend gratitude, but also see how we can make it grow and support.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's so cool because I feel like if I'm like imagining this and what it would look like for me, I'm seeing the people who are currently in my life and having gratitude for them, but also people who might not be in my life anymore. And as opposed to having, an indifference towards them, developing that gratitude, like, oh, if you didn't come into my life or if I didn't have that sort of relationship with you, then I wouldn't be where I am today. So everyone's played a part in building you up, and there's so many different lines connecting me to so many people, and it's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it just makes us more compassionate and feel more connected to others, really, which definitely enhances our well-being.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Jana, for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing so many nuggets of wisdom with us. I've really enjoyed talking about this topic with you.
Thank you, Joanna. It was lovely to be here. And thank you so much for taking the time. I love the conversation as well because, it's all about connecting with others.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Thank you.
There's another line that's just been drawn on my little map.
Exactly. Exactly. And you're on my map. Okay. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Now, if we want to find out more information about you, where can we go?
Well, the best way to go is to the website of the School of Positive Psychology in Singapore. You're also, if you are in Singapore ever, please come and have a cup of coffee on our lovely campus. You can look me up on LinkedIn as well, Jana Dawson. I'm always happy to connect with people.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jana. And for everyone tuning in, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye.
You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.